Peace and blessings, everybody. This is once again the Cosmic Afro Priest, Cosmocentric Mystic 1212. Um, Coming at you today with a discussion that I don't think a lot of you are going to like. I don't know. But one thing for certain, two things for sure. I don't care if you don't like it per se, as long as this is discussing some historical facts and it leads you to a greater understanding of historical truth. So, with that being said, let me go ahead and just go bust into this presentation for you, and then hopefully, um, it sheds light on a conversation that has been had in the community, and that a lot of people don't know about, and that's pretty much slavery in ancient Kemet, and what it looked like, what it was, and what it wasn't. So we can kind of clear this conversation up and come to a more balanced understanding of what happened, because you got this narrative, running out there, and still, I mean, we have to talk against it. We have to speak on it because people are pushing this discussion like ancient Kemet actually had a group of people designated as servants for lifetimes. You understand? Like you were born into slavery, sort of like ancient, sort of like America nowadays. And that's just not the case. These are lies that people are telling that are having negative consequences on us as a people because it's leading us down into these false philosophies of these foreign fathers, so to speak. So let's go ahead and do some fact checks on slavery in ancient Kemet. So, all right. So what you have right here is my screen in front of you. Hopefully, you're able to see this right here. Let's look at what happens if I make it a little bit bigger for the viewing audience. All right, let me check that out. All right, so we're going to start off, right? So as we look at slavery in ancient Egypt, we come to see that it has several different dimensions. So it's a state a person entered into as a result of becoming a prisoner of war. So as we move on, we're going to see that ancient Kemet had a lot of battles. Almost every king that ruled over ancient Kemet had battles that he had to contend with. He had to specifically contend with a certain group of people. That's also something that we're going to have to discuss here. He had to contend with a specific group of people, right? All right. So, oh man, this look kind of weird. I wonder, trying to do the double screen share thing. That may not work out. That may not work out. All right. So, there's also legal social status in society. So this is another issue that happened where a person would actually sell themselves, they so-called sell themselves into slavery or hire themselves out to a person because they needed, resources. They may have run out of food. They may have been down on their luck, something like that. See, Kemet was a society like any other society, and so it had an economy, just like all societies have an economy. And then as a result, sometimes in the economy, certain people did well, and at other times they didn't. Hold on one second. Let me see something. Give me a moment. All right. 1 2 1 2, checking it out and seeing how it looks. Okay, so here we go. All right. Now, a person who was a slave as a result of legal status was complicated. There were two types. There was a slave referred to as a bak, and we'll get into that a little bit later. And then there was the free man, referred to as the nimhu. Now, this presentation will first deal with the fate of captives in Egypt, who they were, and what happened to them as they entered Egypt. Right. So first of all, we have to take a look at this area right here. Right. So let's really look at this area here. I guess it's called the Fertile Crescent, and so on and so forth. This is Arabia. Here we have up north here, the Hittite, also Hyksos Empire. The Assyrians, the Babylonians were over here as well, and the Mesopotamians. But this Arabia, they want to call this Arabia, but this was really known as the Mesopotamian Assyrian region, right? So up here, right? So look at this area here. This is what I call the land bridge into Kemet, right? And so Kemetic history continuously had a problem and an issue with people coming into Kemet in the northern or southern empire part of the region because of this land bridge. Why? Well, honestly, it's because this big area right here is all desert, and then this area here is desert as well. And so the people found themselves wandering as nomadic pastoralists or whatever. They found themselves wandering their little butts all the way over here into ancient Kemet, right? And they would cause problems, because because of the area, because of there's not a lot of food, there's not a lot of water. They're more warlike, territorial type people. So they would come into Kemet, and we built our civilization along these river valleys, so to speak. So we built our civilization up to such a degree that we had stability, and we produced enough food for the people in our region, right? And so as a result, though, these people who had no food would always try to come into Kemet and then go and settle in this area here where we see there's a lot of water in which they could start growing their crops and their foods and so on and so forth. So we always, and here's a close up, here's a picture where it's closer, where we could just see that, literally you could walk across, from the Sinai Peninsula, you could walk into Kemet. So this is also very, very important for us to understand. This is why the whole splitting of the Red Sea, narrative coming out of the Hebrew Jewish kind of understanding, it makes no sense. Moses would have been a prince of Egypt, right? If he was a prince of Egypt, he would have known the land of Egypt. In knowing the land of Egypt, he would have knew about the wars that they've had with the Hittites, with the Hyksos. And in knowing about the wars, he would have known the easiest way to get into the Sinai Peninsula into Canaan is to go through the land up north, not magically crossing the effing Red Sea, when he would have came from the northern area and then had to go down here. This makes no sense whatsoever. So clearly the story is a fiction made up for people, right? So now the details of the fates of enemy captives are found in three primary contexts, right? The royal monuments and inscriptions, tomb biographies or stelae of officials and military leaders, and on administrative papyri. Two primary outcomes are evidence, right? So if you became a prisoner in ancient Kemet, there was two ways. You had two fates. You either went into forced labor, which was the majority of prisoners, or there was execution, particularly of the leaders. And it's also but we also have to and we're going to explore some of that, which is kind of gory. I'm not going to lie, it wasn't the best of the best. But we're definitely going to explore some of that in the future part of our conversation. Anyway, and it's also possible. This is one thing we also got to realize. It was possible for foreign slaves to earn their freedom. So that's something else that we also, need to also take into consideration when discussing and understanding, slavery in ancient Kemet. So the most Egyptian terms for captive, right? The most common term for captive or prisoner of war is seker and ankh, right? Which literally means living, smited, or struck one. When singular in number, it's nearly always written with the bound captive SKR. Well, when he says the bound captive determinative, he's talking about this here, right? The verb seker, variously written in these ways, etc., has a wide array of meaning, ranging from strike the head to strike down foes, right? And so, and then while I'm looking at it, right, I was like, okay, this person is not really taking into consideration, Kemetic language, right? So really, what you have here is really two different spellings, but four different ways in which it's spelled, right? So this first one is seker. This spelling is uniliterals with the determinatives of a knife and an arm, right? This area right here is the determinatives, right? And it indicates the arm the arm welding the knife, right? So clearly this is an enemy of war, which was just dealt with, right? The next is the spelling that also includes uniliterals with the determinative right here. So this is also indicating someone who has been at war with Ancient Kemet. Likewise, this is a unilateral with a biliteral, has the determinative with a club, indicating again once someone's been struck, are at war with them, right? Now here though, this is seker and onk, right? This means prisoner for life, right? This is somebody that was bound. This is somebody that is a captive of war. These other phrases could be referencing anybody that they had a battle with. They could be referencing somebody they just fought with. This in particular means a captive for life. So it would be referencing quite literally somebody they have been at war with. So we need to understand that in particular, right? So another term used for captives was hekau or hekaut, right, which also carries more meaning of plunder or spoils of things carried off. It would seem that this term that was used as the outcome of warfare or fighting, namely plunder, most often it referred to hekau or hekaut, referred to captives, but it could also refer to like spoils, right? So, and then as a verb, hek means to plunder. To plunder, capture towns, carry off captives, or make prisoner. It can be used to capture specific people like the Sashu or Asiatics or Meshwesh, enemy possessions, or more generically foreign lands. Overall, the term implies plundering with economic motivations as it was in the best interest of the land. Once again, I got to break it down because he's not really taking it into consideration, right? Now, this is the term hekau, made with the bilateral ha. Right here in the beginning, we see. Then the unilateral for K, ka, we saw that earlier. So this is hekau, right? But it's a plurality, right? This hand with the stick is indicating possession, right? But this is a specific possession, the possession of the captive. We see that with the determinative of the captive right here, right? And then once again, we have hekaut. Now we know that this is a T, because we see the uniliteral for tea here, which is a loaf and bread, right? But we also know it's plural, meaning because we have these three marks here. Usually when you see these three marks, not usually, when you see these three marks in the hieroglyphic language, it means plurality, right? But also look at this, carrying off of possessions, right? So hekaut, multiple possessions, hekaut, and this is a possession. So this is plundering, taking of things. This is the taking of captives. The Kemites, one thing about the Kemites that we have to respect is that they were very, very, very specific in their language. Because we have multiple ways of saying one word. And so they're saying possessions here with the determinative of a captive, a human captive, and they're saying possessions here with the determinative of carrying off something, right? Now, forced labor. So regardless of the term used for a particular captive, one common fate of the people that were taken captive is that they had to go into forced labor. Now, the Egyptians had several terms which conveyed the notion of forced labor: merit, dependent, deptet, personnel, hesabu, forced laborers, bekau, workers, himau, servants, himuzin, royal servants, Amau, Asiatics, or even Seker and Ankh, right? Prisoners of war. So once again, they don't understand the Kemetic language. They don't understand what they're doing. Whenever you see Himau, servant or slave. This is also like the him necher, right? Him is servant or slave, right? So when you say him necher, that would be a servant or slave of the Most High. But that could also be translated as when you see that prophet of God. So like the him necher was the high priest of a certain temple within a certain region, right? So yeah, we have to be careful. Bekau, now that would be more related to what the forced laborers would be, going into, right? And then Amu are Asiatics. Now the Amu are definitely a problem in ancient Kemet. Don't get that. We should not ever get that twisted. The Amu Asiatics are definitely a problem, and then we're gonna explore that a little bit later on, right? So when a person became a Sekhet or an Ankh, a captive for life, they were first the property of the king, and then allowed to be kept by the soldier that captured him. The captive, as a result of acting correctly, could have, not necessarily was set free, could have been set free in the land of Kemet. So prisoners of war, if found to be a person that acts right, they can find themselves free. So like, we shouldn't have a problem with the fact that a group of people, specifically the soldiers that were captured, became prisoners, and then after seeing that they're just and righteous, we're able to be released into society, right? And so we should really look at this as like the Kemites upholding the principles of Ma'at here. This was really dope, actually. So hold a second. Oh no, my battery is dying. I'm gonna just have to rock out with this. Let me see something. Okay. So this is going to be a two-part series. I'm going to go ahead and do the second part a little bit later. But before we get there, I'm going to go ahead and finish this out, right? So a bondman could be freed through adoption, and the children of the people freed were free. Another path was becoming a servant of the temple after the king purified you. So we really don't know what that purification meant, but we do know that there was several, in Tutankhamun's restoration stele, we do know that the king purified several slaves, and then they could work in the royal palace after being purified. So my guess is the purification process was more or less related to like, okay, these people are known to be okay. This group of people is fine. They're honorable. They can be released from their captivity, right? So what is known is that the state took responsibility for prisoners and assigned them to various tasks. During this period, captives adorned the walls of temples as part of the sequential presentations of the king's victories. Rather than appearing in booty lists, not booty rocking everywhere, we're talking about possessions taken. Captives are generally identified by caption text as chiefs by terms discussed above their ethnicity. These captains simply serve to complement the iconography, but provide some details of their captives. So let me show you some of the things. This is the Battle of Kadesh. Let me see if I have some more pictures here. So this is the return of the Battle of Kadesh. I think that Ramses II is shown. This is what Ramses II showed, bragging about himself and how dope he was. Let's see here. Once again, so if we look here, we can see that these are captives being bound. This is also Ramses II. These are talking about the captives, the Asiatic captives that he bound up and took back from his slavery. I think this might be the Battle of Megiddo that he engaged in. So let's see here. This is now when we're discussing slavery in ancient Kemet, right? There was some serious, fates that could have been awaiting different people, right? So right here, what we're looking at is a captive having his hand cut off. This is different ways that captives would have their hands cut off once they were captured. So these were war, man. This is war. Not everybody was cool. You know what I'm saying? And Kemet treated you like a prisoner, an enemy of the state. You were an enemy of the state. Deal with it. That's just how it went, right? Once again, the Battle of Kadesh. Once again, a return after the Battle of Kadesh, right? So And let's look here. Now, this is specifically a stele of Ramses' triumphs over the Asiatics and Libyans in the battle, right? So we're really Ramses. Here's now these are Nubians, I think. No, Asiatic captives. Once again, being taken in, and the reason why there's a lot of Asiatic captives, once again, these are Hittites. Being taken captive. This is because these people were causing and wreaking havoc along this route, along this way, right? So Kemet, the 18th dynasty in ancient Kemet was a warrior dynasty. We have to understand that because it just came out of they were devastated. They had post-traumatic syndrome because these Hittites came through, these Hyksos came through and conquered the country, right? But see, we have to look at the relationship that the Hyksos, the Asiatics, the Amu, the Aparu, the Habaru, these people had with Kemet. It's very deep. It's very deep. It's not simple. It's not simple. Once again, now this is Seti returning with Shashu captives, right? Let's see if I can I can't get that any bigger for you. But you just have to know, right? And these are Asiatic prisoners from the Memphite tomb of Horemheb, right? The 18th dynasty pharaoh that took over after the half Kemetic, half Asiatic dynasty of Akhenaten and his whole crew, right? So this is the one thing that what we have to understand when we're looking at the reason why that the Asiatics were such a problem. Remember, if you missed my beginning presentation, is because there was no food in this area, and this was a natural land bridge to kind of cross over. Now, Avaris is very important, and in another discussion, I'm going to talk about how Avaris was the capital of the Hyksos kingdom, but was also kind of the launching place of invasions or immigrations into the Kemetic lands, right? And so, but it was very natural. It was very natural for people just to kind of wander into here, migrate after not having anything to eat. This was like something very natural for them to do. So don't think of it like as something that was out of place, right? It's just a natural land bridge. So I'll go, I think I have time to finish up here. All right. To be taken as a slave could be considered a blessing. Otherwise, there were worse fates. And then, so here's a document coming out of the Middle Kingdom, right? In ancient societies, modern notions like separation of church and state were they're absent, right? Capital punishment was the restoration of order and thus ritualized. For example, during the Middle Kingdom, Senuseret is quick to act with the utmost brutality, right? Them that had trespassed on this house, my majesty made a great slaughter among them, both men and women, the valleys being filled with the flayed and the mountains with the transfixed. The enemy from the terraces was placed on the brazier. It was death by fire because of what they did. So this is telling us they burned them. They burned their enemies, right? Now this is called the ritual slaying at Megrisa, a Middle Kingdom fort in Nubia. Right? Not just Asiatics, but also Africans in Nubia, right? Over 175 excretion texts were found adjacent to the remains of a man who was slain as a living excretion rite. A human skull was found merely 20 centimeters from a knife that has been conclusively demonstrated was used for ritual slaying. What is it saying? The Kemites ritualistically slayed this person, right? Why? It could have been for any number of reasons. We just know that it happened, right? Now, we got something else saying here. The Egyptian gaze and ritual slayings is not something that continued to be avoided by Egyptologists in light of recent archaeological discoveries. In addition to the discoveries at Mirgissa, excavations at Avaris, we got to remember, Avaris is something cool, something serious, have uncovered 2 pits. The latter most likely associated with the New Kingdom, Pharaoh Amos. The first pit contained 3 human skulls, providing more evidence of excretion rites. The next skulls were fingers and right hands of 3 male individuals. So they said that the fingers and the right hands of 3 male individuals. Let's remember this picture here, everybody. Hold a second. This is a picture of the Kemites taking the hands of their enemies. So And to the Kemites, this was what? What was this to the Kemites? To the Kemites, this was, hold on, what was this? The restoration of order. So you had people that came in and attacked the Kemites, and in order for the Kemites to restore order, what did they do? They kicked their. All right. So that is a brief discussion on slavery in ancient Kemet. I hope you enjoyed it. I can go in a little bit later, but I'm in a space right now. I'm not at this. I'm not at my pad, so I'm in a different little space. And then later on, we can talk about more details about slavery in ancient Egypt. We can talk about the history of the Hyksos in ancient Kemet and what they've done, and then why there was such a problem. But one thing we know for certain, two things for sure. I think I said that. One thing for sure, two things for certain, whatever. The Hebrews were never systemically enslaved in Egypt. This is a false Hebrew Israelite doctrine, right? False Jewish doctrine, false Christian doctrine, right? False Western Abrahamic faith doctrine per se. But if we wanted to say this can be a cultural social memory of a group of people, we might be able to rock with that. Because later on we're going to see exactly who these people were in another discussion. In another discussion, I will show you who these people were, because they are some people. We have to give them credit for that. We do find Israel in the Merenptah Stela, and we do find admission in a later 9th century, 10th century document talking about Israel outside in extra biblical sources. So we got to give them some credit. But who are they, and what did they do to become who they are? This is the question that we're going to explore, and I hope you kind of sit here with me and explore it with me. Until that time, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, lights and gods and goddesses, I want to say peace and blessings. Ra'ank Mari Hatep. May the light and love of the divine essence grow and manifest through you. Peace and hair grease.